a special installment, a part two of the news that we are waking up to. And it's because the peace talks in London today, that I personally had very high hopes for, have completely collapsed. And we'll talk about why and what the reaction has been. But let's take a look at it, right? Let's start with kind of the motivating factor. Rubio pulled out, right? So Zelensky made it clear that there were a couple of pieces of the American peace plan that were simply unacceptable and non-starters for Ukraine. This was in Paris last week. And one of the chief things is the recognition of Crimea as Russia. The Organization for Crimean Tatars has said that they will never accept such a thing. Europe has said that they will never accept such a thing. Ukraine has said that they will never accept such a thing. And yet, Russia's insistence on its own appeasement and Trump's deep desire to appease them led the United States to including Crimea as Russian, an acknowledgement of Crimea as Russian, in the face of all international opposition and facts on the ground. They tried to force what can only be called the surrender of Ukraine. Well, Ukraine's not going to surrender for anybody. If these people were down to slingshots, bows, and arrows, they would keep fighting the Russian menace. And it's just now that the United States is coming to realize this. And so Secretary of State Rubio decided it was pointless to go to London, and he wasn't going to be bothered. And so he's staying home. And that has had consequences. The primary consequence is that the other foreign ministers from countries like Germany and France are not traveling to London either. So there's no ministerial level peace talks happening in London today at all. Now, one of the things that really bothers me about this is not just the fact that peace is so hard we have to give up now that Ukraine won't just surrender and give us our way. These people are children. The Trump administration is a bunch of screaming toddlers who do not give a fuck about anybody else's needs but their own. Now, the fact that the ministers have walked away from this is pointedly disappointing to me. And I know, like, who the fuck am I to be disappointed? But seriously, look, nobody loves the United States more than I do. I mean, the real United States, not Trump's fascist United States. But it is time to sideline the U.S. The U.S. under Trump is nobody's fucking friend. And we can see that writ large here. Ukraine's not going to roll over. We're washing our hands of the whole thing, and we're, to quote Marco Rubio, moving on. As if the most important geopolitical happening of our lives wasn't going to continue just because we don't have the attention span to give it. The personally upsetting thing to me, or annoying thing to me, is that I know how hard it is to get to Kyiv. There's no air travel here. All these other guys can hop on a plane, fly from Paris to London, go right through customs, no problem, right? Poor fucking Zelensky. He had to travel to London for this today. That means you got to leave Ukraine at least 24 hours before, because it's going to take you that long to get to Warsaw, get on a plane, and then go someplace. So the poor guy is stuck traveling for nothing, for nothing, when he could be home doing the business of the Ukrainian people. And it's because Marco Rubio and his cohorts have the attention span of goldfish. Now, Putin, there's been two reactions from the Kremlin. One has been what most of the mainstream media is calling a 180, that Putin has proposed freezing the special military operation along the current front line and engaging with Kyiv in negotiations directly. He's expressed a willingness to do that. Now, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, as we'll see in a minute, but why would this be the case? It would be the case because he's coming to realize that the United States doesn't have the cards. They can't force Zelensky to surrender. And so if they can't force Ukraine to surrender, Putin is eventually going to have to deal with Ukraine. Not that he's really ready to do that yet. This is another media stunt, right, that he's willing to engage with Ukraine. He has no respect for the Ukrainians, no respect for the government. He is not going to be a partner in good faith. That's not a thing. And this thing about freezing the front lines as part of the Trump peace deal is just his effort to secure his gains at a time when Ukrainian capabilities are ramping up, even as Russian capabilities are being diminished every single day. Now, what were the terms of the so-called American peace plan? Well, Russia gets everything, right? These are the details. U.S. recognition of Russian control in Crimea, non-starter for the Ukrainians. De facto recognition of the Russian occupation of nearly all of Luhansk Oblast and the occupied portions of Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. 18% of Ukraine we're going to recognize in ignoring all international law and international opinion. The United States is going to recognize these territories as Russian. That's Ukrainian surrender, is what that is. Further surrender, a promise that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. The text notes that Ukraine could become part of the European Union. Oh, big fucking deal, right? NATO is where the security guarantees are. The lifting of sanctions imposed since 2014 and enhanced economic cooperation with the U.S. Russia gets everything it wants. It gets its land. It gets Ukrainian land. It gets Ukrainian people. It gets neutral status for Ukraine, and it gets its sanctions lifted. It's a de facto surrender of Ukraine. That's all Trump's peace deal is. Just give the Russians everything they fucking want. What does Ukraine get for its surrender? A robust security guarantee involving an ad hoc group of European countries and like-minded non-European countries, specifically Turkey and Canada. The document is vague in terms of how this peacekeeping operation would function and does not mention any U.S. participation. So we'll put peacekeepers in Ukraine, but they won't be American. We'll have no skin in this game at all. We're going to count on the Europeans to do it. The return of the small part of Kharkiv Oblast Russia is still occupying. Big deal. Unimpeded passage of the Dnipro River, which runs along the front line in parts of southern Ukraine. Now, this is not, all of this comes directly from Axios. It's all verified by other reporting in AP, Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, but this was the best summary that I found of this material. What it does not mention in terms of what Russia gets is control of the Dnipro. What? It's the main thoroughfare water. It's a big deep water river. It's a main thoroughfare for shipping. It feeds the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, cooling ponds. And to give Russia navigation of the Dnipro while promising the Ukrainians that they'll still be able to use it is a betrayal of the deepest sort, and it sets Russia up for a new casus belli moving forward. It's completely unacceptable. Compensation and assistance for rebuilding, though the document does not say where the funding will come from, which clearly part of it should come from the frozen Russian assets. More of it should come from Russia. Russia gets everything it wants. Ukraine is sidelined with no real guarantees of any kind. No real plan. Just a plan for a plan. Other elements of the plan include turning the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest facility of its kind in Europe, declaring it Ukrainian territory, but operated by the United States, supplying electricity to both parties, so America makes money coming and going on an investment it never made. It is like, to see this kind of economic extortion of the Ukrainians from the American government is an obscenity that I will never unsee. The document references the U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal, which Trump has said will be signed on Thursday. I don't know that that's going to happen. I was very hopeful that in London there would be sidebar conversations about an EU minerals deal, and Ukraine would be able to tell America to go fuck itself and sign with the Europeans instead. Any deal would be better than what America is offering. Negotiations are supposed to begin tomorrow, and they're supposed to be concluded April 26th, as I understand it. Whether or not the Ukrainians will sign the mineral deal, it's up to them. If they think it's in their best interest to do it, then I think we should all support them. But it is disturbing to no end for me to see the United States wielding its power in this way, kicking down in this way. The intrigue. The plan was drafted after Trump's envoy and Putin apologist Steve Witkoff met with Putin for more than 4 hours last week, obviously. Right? Putin gave him the list of demands. He ran it home like the faithful lapdog he is to Trump, who said, go ahead, give it to them. And here we are. Knowing full well that these terms are unacceptable to Ukraine. After the plan was presented, Putin offered to pause Russia's invasion along the current front line as part of a potential deal. Putin is in an awfully tricky spot. The far-right nationalists in his country want to see Ukraine obliterated and will not be satisfied until that happens. His economy is dependent on the war continuing right now. With the price of oil plunging the way it has, he's in trouble financially. So to stop the war would be to kill the Russian economy. But he's running out of everything. He's running out of money. He's running out of men. He's running out of materiel to continue to prosecute this war. So he has no off-ramp. And if the U.S. doesn't hand him Ukraine, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for the Russian Federation. I don't see how the Russian Federation survives it or the loss of Vladimir Putin. So the pausing of the fighting is desperately needed by both sides. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. But neither side can afford to stop. Ukraine stops, there's no more Ukraine. Russia stops, there could well be no more Russia. This gesture from Putin so far to signal he's willing to make peace, but European officials remain skeptical. It's bullshit. This whole thing about pausing is bullshit. Here's why. Oh, wait, hold on, it's coming up here. Witkoff, I will remind everybody that Witkoff is a billionaire real estate developer friend of Trump's. He's no diplomat. He's supposed to be the Middle East envoy. What the fuck is he doing in Moscow? I'll tell you what he's doing there. The Russians asked for him. They didn't want to deal with General Keith Kellogg, who understands the situation, and the Russians. He's not easily manipulated. Witkoff, on the other hand, is just a credulous fool who will buy into anything the Russians tell him. And we're seeing that every day. So Witkoff will travel to Moscow later this week for his fourth meeting for Putin, with Putin. I can't imagine it's going to be productive since the peace talks have all fallen apart now. But Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are both expected to skip talks in London on Wednesday involving U.S., Ukrainian, French, German, and UK officials. Both had previously planned to attend. Again, those talks are not happening, right? None of the French, German, or UK ministers of defense or foreign ministers will be in attendance. Instead, Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg is expected to lead the U.S. delegation. The U.S. proposal is expected to be part of the discussions. The U.S. proposal is a non-starter. It's a failure. It is merely the diplomatic language of surrender and appeasement. And the Ukrainians aren't going to go for it. A U.S. official involved in the discussion said Rubio and Witkoff worked together to develop a framework to get us closer to reaching the end of the war. What bullshit is that? Their framework doesn't include any of what Ukraine needs. It is a laundry list of Russian wishes. The decision was made for the Secretary to not travel to London. Instead, the U.S. delegation will continue to engage in conversations with UK and Ukrainian counterparts. So it's my understanding that there are talks happening, but they are at the expert level, not the ministerial level. So representatives of the foreign ministries and the defense ministries of the UK, France, Germany, etc., will be in attendance, and they will report back to their bosses. But the real decision makers will not be there. Just as Kellogg has been sidelined by his own administration, so too we can expect the U.S. delegation to be sidelined in these talks. They have nothing to offer. Rubio tweeted that he had a productive conversation with his UK counterpart and looked forward to following up after the discussions in London. We're at an impasse. The Ukrainians are never going to accept the Russian demands, and the Russians are never going to accept Ukrainian compromises. They want it all. Their hunger is insatiable, and they will not be stopped. Now, if you look here, right, this is what used to be the Novokakhovka Reservoir. This is basically empty now. The Dnipro River flows all the way from up here through Kyiv, all the way down through the town of Dnipro, and then out to the Black Sea. A critical point in the Trump peace plan is that the navigation of these waterways, while assured for Kyiv, are under the control of the Russians. The Russians want control of all of this, all the way up to the city of Dnipro. Now, how long before they want it all the way to Kyiv? This will be their excuse for their next invasion. If they're given these things, which I think it's unlikely that they will be. But they are making claims to land that they don't even occupy, right? Parts of Zaporizhia, parts of Donetsk parts of Luhansk are not under Russian military control. But they're insisting on having them given to them, even though not a single Russian soldier has set foot there. It's a non-starter. It's just a non-starter. So after promising a deal within 24 hours of taking office, then kicking off weeks of negotiations, Trump said Friday that he was about ready to give up. Attention span of a goldfish. He hasn't set a deadline or said whether he would take any further action beyond walking away. Frankly, the best thing this fucker could do is walk away. Let it be known to the Europeans that their future is in their own hands. He's not going to be there to help them. And then I think we'll see some action real quick. Europe may have been dependent on the United States for the last 80 years for its nuclear umbrella, for its defense in NATO, etc. But the Europeans know who they are. And at a time of crisis like this, when there is an existential threat to their life, they aren't dancing and cheering on the end to YMCA. No, they're mobilizing for action. And that's what we need. Now, in the Kremlin, this is what I'm talking about, Putin talking out of both sides of his mouth. Because on the one hand, he's saying, freeze the front line where it is, we'll stop fighting. But on the other hand, and the link to the full Kyiv Post article is there for those who are interested, the Kremlin is triumphant after the news that Ukraine peace talks in London had collapsed, saying that talks with the US continue, but not with Kyiv or Europe. They said the quiet part out loud there. They want to be able to divvy up Ukraine with the other superpower as they see it, with America, without any concern for what European allies think or what the Ukrainians think. And it's my considered opinion, this is why they are doomed to lose. We live in an interconnected world. The effects of Trump's tariffs, even these 10% tariffs, are already being felt acutely in the United States. Trump is threatening everybody's income and stability. Intel, largest chip manufacturer in the US, announced it's laying off 20% of its people, after Congress just put billions into the CHIPS Act so that we would maintain domestic production of our most advanced AI chips and microchips. And now Intel's laying off 20% of its people because Trump is destroying it all. He's like a wrecking ball. So the Kremlin is triumphant. They are popping champagne corks in Moscow. And America, I got to tell you, when your greatest enemy is popping champagne corks over what you've done, you ought to ask yourself why. Okay, that's me, Peter Alexievich. And this has been the news that we are waking up to for Wednesday, the 23rd of April, 2025. I'll see everybody on the live tonight. Thanks, guys.